Change is inevitable. It has always been around and will continue to impact the lives of all for years to come. Change is what we put on the news every morning, what we fight for, what we live for. Public opinion is always written when we are faced with new challenges, even old ones brought back to light. Multiple factors determine the public's opinion about changes in society, such as culture, ethnicity, race, gender, sexuality, even age. Oftentimes, change is brought forth with force, but not always. One example of peaceful change in our history is the Civil Rights Movement of 1954, led by social activist Martin Luther King Jr. He used nonviolent protests, political sit-ins, and brilliant speeches to get his message out to the eyes and ears of the entire nation. Martin Luther King's pacifistic movements paved the way for change in America. But at what cost? How many beatings did it take? How many arrests? How many deaths did it take for equality to even be a governmental requirement? They'll never show that number. Nearly 3 decades after the Civil Rights Movement, the LA riots of '92 had begun. It all started with the acquitted charges placed on 4 LAPD officers for the excessive beating of Rodney King 1 year prior to the trial. Communities were enraged with the injustice and decided the best thing to do was create havoc. Over the span of 5 days, the riots left more than 50 people dead, as well as 2,000 injured, not to mention the incarceration of 12,000 rioters. Nearly 1,000 buildings and stores were damaged, burning a $1 billion hole in the economy's pocket. The officers were then retried for violation of civil rights, resulting in the sentence of 2 officers to 30 months in prison. Now keep in mind, these riots took place a mere 7 years before most of us were even born. The rioters got what they wanted, justice. But again, at what cost? Was it worth the destruction of your very neighborhood? Was it worth the body count? Which brings us to our most recent event, the Charlotte City riots, which consisted of peaceful and violent protests, resulting from the death of Keith Lamont Scott by Charlotte police officer Brentley Vinson. This sparked protests from members of the community, which quickly spread through Charlotte. Some citizens were outraged to the point of causing damage to the very community they live, shop, and work in. But on the other hand, some citizens decided to show their support by gathering peacefully, conducting nonviolent protests. Regardless of how one chose to cope and display their emotions, what will be the end result? The question still remains. Are violent protests more effective than nonviolent? Is it a mixture of both? Coming from a public point of view, it can be relatively hard to get behind a peaceful protest. A riot, on the other hand, is like a match. The blaze burns bright for all to see. It's crazy and appealing to the public because people crave chaos. As far as awareness, riots are very effective, and that match will continue to burn until they run out of reasons. The emotion feeling leaves, oftentimes forgetting if it was really worth the time and the effort, or the felony charge, or the broken arm, or the tear gas, or the terror of the emotional state of others around you. A recent study in the origins of violence, conducted at Arizona State University by political scientist Erica Sinowith, concluded with data showing that nonviolent protests are a staggering 30% more successful than violent ones. Violent protests over the course of the last 12 decades has resulted in a 70% rate of failure. So, is violence the answer? The moral and logical answer is no. But there have been multiple cases in America's history that have taken place that weren't exactly moral acts. We say we live and we learn. But I say we live and we forget. I say that people don't change. Names do. I say conflict doesn't change. Weapons do. Regardless of any social category, everyone feels pain. Everyone cries and laughs and hopes and dreams and lives and dies all the same. Why are we letting these social barriers stall the unification of our civil society? Nonviolent protests have been and always should be the way to go.